Welcome to The Writer Reads, Dinner and a Show, a science fiction short story. This is part 4 of 6. Just don't fly it into the ground, he admonished. Some things even Doc can't patch, and I'm still owed some leave and a damned fine dinner. You got me? I nodded and wormed my way into the system, cloaking my presence in the shadow of an ARAC program I'd modified under another spider's guidance. Memory of Ascavor caused a momentary pitch of sadness, and I wondered how the Weaver was getting on. Not the time, Cutter, and Mack's use of my name pulled me abruptly back to the task he needed me to do. Fly the shuttle like it was never designed to fly, but without crashing it so hard I broke us as well as the craft and the mercs, which was a pity because it was a nice ship. Right. I wormed further in, found the control center, and began isolating things from the pilot, cutting him off from the controls but leaving him access while I checked out the co-pilot's controls. I remembered piloting another shuttle and having my co-pilot lock me out of the system. I needed to make sure that didn't happen here. I wanted all the controls, and I needed to see. This was going to be fun, but I still had the boy to look out for. 15 was too young to be locked out of your head. Cascade, come! Fetch Rohan! Bring him back! I set the call up on a repeating cycle, borrowing recordings of both Mack and Tenz's voices to intersperse with mine. I mean, I might be a tiny bit scary, but when it came to the boys' world, those two were at the top, and the dog knew that. I found a third override, one that linked me back to the Merc's cruiser, the one sitting on Overwatch overhead. I couldn't help it. I started snickering. The shuttle wasn't the only thing I could bring down somewhere inconvenient, and Celeste was known for its beaches. It had a lot of oceans. I just had to make sure I didn't bring it into land where someone was having the holiday of a lifetime. Simple, right? First the shuttle, then while the cruiser was trying to work out why its override wasn't working, I was going to get to cause some real mischief. This was so much easier when I was juiced. That didn't mean I couldn't do it, just that I had to focus a lot more. I took a look at the local flight routes, traffic, and cityscape, and another snicker bubbled out of me. First, we were going to buzz a shopping mall, then do a dirty flyby over a beach too full of umbrellas to resist, and then I found a cruise liner and figured it needed more waves, a sky tour that could do with a bit of turbulence, and a whole mess of little atmospheric craft that needed more than a race to keep them entertained. And then I waited, searching the skies and the dropship's radar for signs of retaliation, and searching the system for the cruiser's attempted intervention. It didn't take long. The Exarch cruiser came online after an enraged exchange of reproach, accusation, and panic denial, and the controls ran hot as whoever was upstairs tried to undo what I'd done to the shuttle's control system. I decided to make their life more interesting by hacking a site for lewd songs and piping it through the craft's speaker system full bore. Chalk one up for overflying a schoolyard and what looked like a monastery as I sent the music back up the chain to entertain the cruiser's company. By then, the cruiser had made enough connections that I had a smorgasbord of access points to choose from, so I sent a small package of inconvenience down each and every one of them. It took me a little time, but I had to keep changing where I was situated in the system as the programs looking for the shuttle's problem multiplied and became more persistent. Adding a school tour, some of Celeste's bluer broadcasts, and some very crude and politically incorrect songs to the shuttle's route and repertoire, I plotted a course over the buildings of planetary governance and set the shuttle on course to buzz what looked like a normal airfield, but which I was fairly certain had some defensive purpose. After that, I plotted a course for the parliamentary gardens and added a few aerobatic maneuvers to keep folk busy along the way. Those I was sure would have the Mercs scrambling for a handhold. The Mercs! I wasn't sure how long it would take them to work out they had an internal access problem from their passengers, and not some external hacking intruder. I suppose they were thinking none of their passengers would risk themselves with the hijinks I was putting them through. More fool them, because if they thought that, then their research was clearly lacking. The airfield I was heading for suddenly came alive, and I would have bet my britches those things were for more than aerobatic shows. Oh, crap! So much for my plans of trying to crash the cruiser into the ocean. It looked like I was going to be much, much too busy not getting myself killed down here. It also looked like a landing in the parliamentary gardens was out of the question. Then again, what could be more inconvenient than having a group of mercs force landed in a military controlled airbase with their kidnapped victims on board? An alarm started inside the system, unfortunately echoed by something much, much louder outside the system. I jolted out of my false sleep with a gasp, opening my eyes to lights strobing in amber and red. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, then registered the aching pressure over my mouth and my muffled voice. The mercs ignored me. They were scrambling, their suits closed and helmets sealed. The one who'd brought me on board noticed I was awake and conscious of my surroundings. He gave me the bird as he headed for the side door, which was slowly coming open. As a means of destabilization, this was a doozy. It was even better than the acrobatics I'd programmed in, which the craft was also not designed for, and which were meant to commence in. My eyes widened as the cockpit crew joined the mercs and they all started to jump. My previous captor shouted something by way of farewell, and I couldn't immediately make it out. By the time I did piece it together, he was gone. "It sucks to be you." "Yeah, nice one. Have fun getting to the ground without this thing coming down on your head," I thought. But they'd no sooner left the door and started to drop than they were shrouded in silver light and disappeared. I scowled. I really should have crashed that cruiser. Which was when I realized none of them had been wearing chutes, which only begged the question of why they couldn't just have teleported from inside the dropship. Which was when I realized they must have a teleport blocker operating on the shuttle. Well, damn, that was something I needed to defuse. I tried to ignore the wind whipping through the still opening door and the question of why the mercs hadn't taken us with them. After all, we were their biggest payday ever, and they just left us behind? Why would they do that? Trying not to let that particular conundrum distract me, I dived back into the system. It was harder than it sounded, given I had a fair idea of what the Celesti pilots were likely to do next, and I couldn't think of a single way to stop them firing the first missile. I needed to be in enough control of this beast to minimize the damage from a hit, or we'd end up on the ground in itty-bitty pieces, and I was sure Doc had no way of putting us back together from that state. Unless we somehow preserved our minds and got right onto cloning. The situation didn't look good. We were all alone up here, and not a single one of my crewmates had stirred. Double the crap. I took a deep breath and sank into my implant. "Rohan! I need you! Tens!" Out of desperation, I added, "Delight, I couldn't bring myself to add the rest, but I figured she was a smart girl. She'd figure it out. Because she'd know I wouldn't call on her unless I needed her. And I did. I really, really did. I had no stims, no way of monitoring the outside of me while I was in the shuttle systems, and no way of knowing if I could bring down the teleport blocker, block a missile, and keep flying this thing. Oh, and I needed to stabilize the shuttle and turn the emergency mechanisms back on, like I didn't have enough to do. And how did I know the emergency mechanisms were off? Because the damn door should have shut, and the autopilot should have. Well, shit, because I think I might have turned that sucker off. Maybe if I turned it back on again. Hmm. I went back to piloting the systems, wishing I knew exactly where I had to go next. Way back when I'd needed to fly a shuttle to make a drop so she could track me to a Were Cartel's base, Delight had dumped the how to fly files into my head. She hadn't given me anything else. I had an idea what the layout was, and while I'd danced through plenty of ship systems, I'd been hyped on some kind of stim pack each and every time. This time it was just me. No enhancements, and no sense of confidence that I could do anything that I'd done before. At least, not in the time I had left to do it in. And I'd gotten no reply from any of the unholy trinity I'd tried to call back. Ah! I made it back to the controls and discovered I had another problem. The fighters had seen the mercs leaving and settled in on either side above and behind us like some kind of escort. On the ground, though, well, it looked like someone had decided it would be better to blow the shuttle while it was heading for the airfield. There weren't so many people out this way. The sensors system lit up with alerts, which wasn't the worst of it. Exarch had sent a few small packages of inconvenience of their own, and I found myself stepping around suspect bundles of code I didn't want to set off. I mean, some of those looked like landmines to me. Crap, I muttered. Where is everybody when you actually need them? It was a rhetorical question, and not one I expected an answer to as I skated around another of Exarch's little presents and hooked into the piloting system, which was when I discovered Exarch's little gifts and were they missile systems? On a resort world? Well, whatever they weren't the worst of my problems. Exarch's flight crew had decided if they couldn't have the shuttle in order to fly it, then no one could. I pivoted in the ruin of what had been a perfectly good set of connections and coding, and my heart hit the floor. There was no way, in all the stars, I was going to be able to fly this. Well, fuck, I said, which is, of course, when Rowan and Tens decided to arrive. Cascade bounded into the space beside them and came to a skidding halt, and then he trotted over to one of Exarch's suspect packages and lifted his leg on it.